Hi, I'm Rob, and if you're new here, I'm an environmental scientist turned ecopreneur who believes that building planet-positive businesses is the best chance we've got of tackling the environmental crisis. For the past 5 years, I've been interviewing founders building businesses to heal the planet on my podcast, Innovate Eco. And now I'm putting that talk into action, and I'm attempting to build my own planet-positive business right here on this new channel. I'll be documenting that journey along the way in a podcast called the Startup Diaries, and also sharing tips and tricks and lessons in videos here. This channel is all about turning environmental passion into action. So if that sounds like something for you, whether you're not having the impact you want in a job that you're in, or whether you're a wannabe ecopreneur yourself looking to build a planet positive business, then hopefully this channel will be for you. So do hit that subscribe button. So yeah, here we are, episode 1 of the Startup Diaries. Welcome. So this is the little podcast mini-series that I'm going to be doing here on YouTube and all good podcast platforms. I'm going to be documenting alongside my new co-host, who I'll introduce in this episode, the journey of myself, after years of interviewing founders of planet positive businesses. I'm going to be attempting to build a planet positive business of my own. So I won't get into it too much because we do in this first episode, we talk about the idea, where it came from. I introduce my co-founder and co-host. Do bear with us as we find our feet. It's going to be a little bit messy and scrappy as we develop the podcast and we come up with ideas, but hopefully it'll be useful. We'll be super transparent about everything from coming up with the idea, validating the idea, building branding, getting a website together, doing crowdfunding, all those kind of things, which if you're a wannabe ecopreneur, hopefully those things will be useful and you can maybe build a business along with us. So yeah, do leave some comments below if you think it's a good idea. If you enjoy this first episode, as I say, we're finding our feet, but hopefully we'll get into the swing of things. But yeah, without further ado, here is the first episode of the Startup Diaries. Hello, and welcome back to the Innovate Eco podcast. And if you tuned into the last episode, the sort of teaser trailer episode, you'll have seen that we're starting something a little bit different this year in 2025. So welcome along to the very first official episode of Innovate Eco, the Startup Diaries. If you didn't listen to, well, firstly, a quick introduction to the podcast again. If you're new here, welcome. If you're back again, then thanks for listening again. The podcast I started back in about 2018, born out of a bit of frustration as an environmental scientist with all the negative news around the environment and feeling like we needed to do more positive things. So I created the podcast to interview founders of companies that are doing something to tackle the environmental crisis. Planet positive companies is what they're sometimes referred to. So taking direct action to tackle various different environmental issues, from plastic pollution to climate change to biodiversity loss and all that kind of stuff. And people have raised a number of times here, have you got your own business? Or are you thinking about starting your own business at any point? And I even ask a question in the podcast at the end, a recurring question to people if they've got business ideas they want to share. And we've been doing that for a while now, which is quite fun. But yeah, people have raised several times, like, when are you going to start your business? When are you going to take action? So 2025 is finally that year where I've decided, you know what, let's do it. Let's start a business of some kind, get going, and then document it in this little mini series called the Startup Diaries. So yeah, welcome. This is the new series. Hope you enjoy it and the concept, and hopefully it's useful. Hopefully it'll inspire more people to start their businesses too and get going in 2025. So yeah, let's dive in. So firstly, one of the big changes from the normal podcast where it's just me on my own. This is a little bit different. I've brought along a co-host, and that person will also be my co-founder, based on a lot of people on the podcast, their recommendations. If they didn't already have a co-founder in their business, several said if they could go back, they would look to start with a co-founder, because entrepreneurship can be a little bit lonely. And also just having different skill sets that complement each other ideally was something that was recommended. So yeah, firstly, I'd like to introduce my co-host and the co-founder of this company that we're going to try and build. It's Matt.
Hello. Thanks for
Uh,
having me.
Thanks for having you. Having me. I mean, yeah, Matt is my brother. You might have realised from the slight similarities in our appearance. Um, But I think one of the key things in finding a co-founder, and this will become clear when we explain the concept of what the business we're going to do is in a bit, but having someone that you know quite well, that you trust, because if the business takes off and is successful, businesses can be tricky and there's lots of things to navigate. So having that trust from day one is quite good. So being I've known you a little while, I guess, so that's probably quite useful. And
Yeah,
then having complementary skill sets of some sort. And again, we'll come on to the business idea very shortly. But yeah, I mean, Matt, if you give us a little bit of a how your background maybe is slightly different to my background in environmental science and ecology. What's your kind of experience you bring to the table, I guess?
sure. Well, firstly, I hope we don't sound too similar because I remember
Mm.
growing up, people getting confused about who we were.
Well,
So,
that's why we're doing this on video now as well. That's the main reason. So
yeah,
hopefully
yeah, we
this
can't be
video
in the
on
same.
YouTube. Yeah.
Um, yes, I agree with everything you said. I like to think that as we've known each other for quite a while, we can be honest with each other. We can tell each other if we think an idea is bad. I think that could be quite useful going forwards. Um,
Definitely.
and I also think, yes, we have very similar interests in all parts of life, but yeah, the main difference, I guess, my background, when you went off and did a science degree, I went off and did an arts degree. I studied architecture and then have moved into a career in more broad design. So yeah, I guess that's where the angle I'm approaching this from is from the design perspective, which when we get on to what the idea is, will
Mm.
become clear why that is important.
Yeah, exactly. Hoping. I mean, that was kind of one of the reasons we ended up on the idea. There's several we could have taken. So it started off when I decided this would be a good idea for a podcast. I want to do a business this year, like racking my brains for what business ideas I've jotted down. And I mentioned this on the podcast in the past is that I have a long list, as many wannabe entrepreneurs have, of potential business ideas. And I've decided it'd be quite funny to dig that out. So I went through that list. I was like, which one of these ideas would be good? Which one could is something we could get started on fairly quickly? Because one of the big things and challenges and why I've not done it in the past is a business can you get stuck in the phase of never getting going because there's something that's too challenging to get going, or you need loads and loads of money to get it off the ground, or you need if it's an app or something, you need to be able to develop the app. Obviously the barrier to entry for these things is a lot lower now. Like I don't know, even 10, 20 years ago, if you were to try and build some of these companies, even building a website would be like a massive hurdle. So things like that are much easier now. But we really wanted something that we were passionate about, that we think could work, but also that we could just get going and moving on quickly. And there's not just another excuse to get going. But before we come on to the idea, there's a lot of foreshadowing of the idea. We'll come on to it, I promise, in a minute. But I've got my list here, which I've been writing down business ideas, jotting them down since about 2012 when I was just finishing uni. Obviously, I've wanted to start a business at some point. So just like 15 years later, here we are. So here's a few, Matt. I'll judge you how. Maybe we'll change our mind. I've not read these. This is exclusive. I've not read these to Matt. Yeah, so maybe you'll hear one of these and be like, actually, screw the idea that we've come up
Yeah.
with. We'll go with that instead. So the top one I've got is it's literally just TripAdvisor, but it's out of 10 instead of 5.
Wow. Isn't I thought TripAdvisor was out of 10.
No, it's
Okay,
definitely a
fine.
5. Um, Clearly, I was annoyed that everything is either like 4 or 5. Yeah, not a great one. I've
Oh,
got
wait. Can I dig into that a bit more? They do
yeah.
half marks on TripAdvisor, I'm pretty sure.
Maybe they do now, but I feel like they didn't at the time. So maybe that idea isn't even valid anymore. Maybe they've addressed that. And
Yeah.
yeah, clearly it doesn't need to be out of 10. It can just bring in decimal points. That has exactly the same effect.
And was there a name for that?
No, just TripAdvisor, but
Okay,
it's 10 out instead of 5.
nice.
Um, I have some sort of hat to keep your nose warm.
Yeah, I would buy that.
Yeah, in fact, and I think the other thing to say here is it's finding the key thing obviously is something that you're passionate about, and with any business, no matter how great it is, there's going to be times where you have to dig deep and really like find that passion and push through. I think it's referred to as the dip. Like it's basically every business can start off quite well and enthusiastic, and then there'll be a period where something happens and you think, oh, what's the point? I guess like with any skill or anything in life. So you have to push through that barrier. And I've just got a feeling that nose hats, like even if they took off really
Mm,
quickly, I think I'd struggle to really find it'd be like imagine coming up with a company mission or vision for the nose hat company. It just
I don't
doesn't
know.
feel inspiring.
Also, you'd be going, your main competitor would be the balaclava industry, and they're pretty
Mm.
scary. People,
They
yeah.
are a notoriously scary industry, the balaclava industry. Um, a couple more, maybe slightly more on the environmental side. I mean, obviously, those ones wouldn't have worked very well for this whole planet positive idea anyway. Um, I've put smart sensors in trees to detect health issues before it's too late. Must have been frustrated at seeing like urban street trees just dying um, and not being addressed, and it's too late when they're dead. So some kind of sensors for trees. I've got a recipe box supermarket. That was something I was passionate about for a long time.
Nice.
I was kind of imagining like an Argos style recipe box supermarket where you'd go in and pick recipes from a screen and then you'd get the exact amounts in a
Mm,
essentially just taking the recipe box idea, but making you could do it on the fly, um, as and when you
interesting.
need it. And then a couple language dating app, an Airbnb for food.
Wait, language is that where you're dating someone who speaks the language you're trying to learn?
Yeah,
Okay, interesting. But you
yeah.
can't, but they can speak your language as well, or you both
Um,
can't speak the language.
the idea was that it'd be two people that are trying to learn each other's language,
Hmm.
and then you could practice whilst on the date, and it's a good
Yeah,
way to.
that'd be quite funny.
So, I feel like there's a new dating app every couple of weeks.
Mm,
So there's this where she's got some kind of like little unique twist on Tinder. So
mm.
anyway, anyone who's listening to this who wants to take these on, go for it. None of them really very planet positive, but yeah, it's just funny to look back at the list, and there was some even more bizarre ones that I won't go into, and some that were slightly more sensible. But just that was just to give you a little taster. Have you got a similar list?
Um, so yeah, when you told me you were going to read out some old ideas, I remembered that I have a list on my phone of
See, we all have a list. I told you.
the notes is titled ideas, but they're not. They're basically just things that made me laugh at one point and what I wanted to write down. Some of them, I guess you could call a business ideas. But I'll just read through a few of these. We can cut this out because they're a bit mad. Um, okay. Erotic mini golf.
Say no more.
I
It's,
genuinely
yeah,
think that would be good if for like 18s plus mini golf, but all the holes are themed around like quite sexually like explicit things.
yeah.
I just think it's an open goal in terms of like balls and holes.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Do you think, I mean, yeah, maybe it would get old after the first nine. You'd be like, it's the same joke.
well, no, there's so many different potential holes.
Yeah, true, true. Okay, yeah, that one's,
Um,
I could see that working.
I have a feeling that you had something to do with this one. Um, Glazing Squid. It's a fish restaurant located. No, sorry. A fish restaurant loosely inspired by Blazing Squad, located on a crossroads. Um, let's find one more. Um, hmm. There's some such weird stuff on this notes thing.
Depending
Uh,
on how many drinks you'd had at the time, there's
yeah, I think
more and more
so.
bizarre.
Um, savory vapes.
What, savory vapes?
Yeah, and then I've got roast beef and chicken and leek as
Brilliant.
I
Yeah.
mean, I missed it. It actually says savory grapes brackets for kids question mark.
But when they're transitioning from like bubblegum and kids flavors to more sophisticated palettes.
Roast beef
Yeah.
is way more refined.
Yeah, that would be so. I mean, it's so weird when we're walking down the street and you walk through a cloud of vape smoke and it was just,
Mm.
yeah,
Freshly baked bread.
yeah, a leek and potato or something. Brilliant. Well,
Yeah,
that's
there you
that. I
go.
mean, there you go. There's a little glimpse into maybe slightly our madness and personalities as well as sort of our
Yeah, yeah.
potential
And
business ideas.
if anyone does want to take any of those forward, we will only take a 20% cut of any
Yeah,
profit.
exactly. So let us know. Yeah, do leave a comment if you like any of those ideas and you think you're taking them forward. We'd love to hear how the savory vapes or the erotic mini golf is going. Let us know. But yeah, as I kind of mentioned before, if it needs to be something that we're passionate about, and for the podcast, the whole point is it's planet positive businesses that are tackling an environmental issue at the same time as being a fun business, hopefully. So that's what we're going to try and do. So I was looking through this list and I came across an idea that me and Matt had had whilst we were on holiday correct me if I'm wrong here, but whilst we were on holiday in Spain a few years ago, and we went on a lynx tour. It was a tour to try and see the Iberian lynx, who is one of the rarest mammals in Europe. It's doing actually quite well now, recovering, but at the time, this was about 5, 6 years ago. It was on the decline and it wasn't doing too great, despite a lot of good conservation efforts. So this sparked a bit of a conversation, didn't it, Matt? Do you remember?
Yeah, yeah. It's a really good insight into what it's like to go on holiday with Rob Rigglesworth, where you get up at 4 in the morning to go on a lynx spotting tour.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I always remember being pitch black and freezing cold, but then
With a
um
slight hangover, but yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that was it. And then we started talking. I remember we were talking in a bar later about this idea.
Yeah. So I thought you were going to reveal it
No,
then.
no.
Yeah, so we were got chatting about how, I mean, I think you were probably aware of the links maybe, but it was a jumping off point for the fun topic of extinction. But not just the topic of extinction, because I think maybe not everyone is aware of like the significance of biodiversity loss as a problem. But I feel like the majority of the public know that nature has declined and maybe we haven't got as much wildlife as we used to have, but I still think I'm surprised at how little is known about what is referred to technically as the biodiversity crisis, but and in many people's eyes potentially a bigger threat to humanity than the climate crisis. But and what I work on in my day job as an ecologist is around this topic, but something I'm very passionate about. But yeah, we got talking about um, how many species are going extinct all the time without anyone even knowing about it. The lynx just being one of those examples that like had suffered significant declines as it could just go extinct, and then we wouldn't have any more of these really cool animals in Europe. And then we were chatting and just looking at stats and the fact that some ridiculous estimation, like we're losing 27,000 species a year, um, which is a pretty crazy figure. I think the background extinction rate is meant to be between like 100 and 1,000, and we're at 27,000. And many of those species we don't even haven't even been discovered yet, which is the like even more mind-blowing thing. A species can go extinct without us even knowing about it. So this is where the topic started to evolve. Like how can we get more people aware in a kind of fun way? How can we raise that awareness of this topic of extinction and but more so like these species that are going extinct that or like, threatened with going extinct that not many people have even heard of. Like even me, someone working in ecology and in the realm of biodiversity, hadn't heard of a lot of these really cool species. So we were like, how do we? Could this be a way to get more awareness of the biodiversity crisis out there without? Because it's clearly not sinking in. It's clearly not infiltrating culture in the way that maybe we need to get actual change. So yeah, this was the topic. This was the conversation around extinction and getting the and infiltrating culture, I guess, was where it started, wasn't it? And that's what got us onto the next point of the idea.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I was definitely even less aware than you on any of these topics. So I think that was quite interesting. Um, yeah, it's one of those things where it's definitely caught my attention. This kind of mad thing is happening that we didn't have that I had no idea about, but also is quite like interesting. And the fact that you kind of want to find out more about that
Mm,
made the idea seem interesting.
yeah. And hopefully that's what will make it interesting to others and kind of testing the idea with various people, which we'll come on to. It does seem to strike a chord with people, which means it kind of feels like you're onto something. So yeah, coming back to this idea that it's something. What can we do to get started and get going quickly, and with the aim of raising awareness of this issue, but also creating a business around it. You could do this loads of ways. You could approach that. You could, I don't know, create a some kind of app or something that connects people, a VR experience or something. Something very technical that would be really difficult to get off the ground. And again, as I said at the start, like something that would be, you probably never start on it because we don't have that background. But Matt does have a background in design, as you said before, and things. So leaning into that and how can we tap into that element, use his skills coupled with my knowledge of the problem and business, and then produce a product around it, something that we can use to raise awareness. So yeah, I guess that's where we got onto the product idea. So should we introduce that now? That's probably a good time. We've
Yeah,
talked around
yeah.
it enough. It's probably time to get into the business idea and what we're actually planning. So
You can do the summary, brand summary.
yeah, so let's try and do a little elevator pitch. And you said you were going to test me on this every every
Yeah,
episode.
every week. I think this is the cheat week because you have to do it to introduce the idea. But I think every week we'll do a test elevator pitch to test your pitching skills and how succinct you can be about what the idea is.
Okay, I still think I've not got it written down, by the way, or anything. So I'm just going to riff, and it'll probably
Yeah,
be
great.
babbling nonsense, and then hopefully by sort of episode 10, we'll have a really succinct elevator pitch that anyone can and get involved with. But essentially, starting with what the problem is, as I said before, we're in the sixth mass extinctions. 27,000 species as a low estimate are going extinct every year, and some of them have not even been discovered yet. Um, so there's a huge issue around the lack of awareness of this extinction crisis, and obviously the extinction crisis itself is an issue. How do we break out of the traditional bubble of conservation, just talking amongst ourselves? How do we infiltrate culture to get the word out there a bit more? And my feeling is, and I think Matt, you agree with this, that most conservation brands that are out there are not that necessarily appealing to everyone. They feel quite, a lot of them have been around a long time. They do a lot of good stuff, but it feels like they struggle to infiltrate culture as much as maybe they could do. They're very much within a bubble. So a lot of people that are very aware of this and are doing things, donating to charity, but it's not quite getting out into wider society. And so we thought the best way to do that and to create a brand around that was through fashion, and creating a talking point around. So we're thinking t-shirts. So creating t-shirts that are limited drop t-shirts, and this is quite a common concept in fashion, becoming more and more common in terms of brands are doing these limited drops, so then they release a certain number of t-shirts, and once they're sold out, they're gone. It creates this hype and talking point around it. So could we do that for this? Create t-shirts that are based on these species that no one's heard of or not many people have heard of, and release only the number of t-shirts linked to the estimated number in the wild. So a real talking point if we create really nice artwork, hopefully, which will be a topic of future episodes. And how do we do that in an interesting way? It'll hopefully be a talking point and something that people can feel really passionate about, and something that's a little bit, it crosses that boundary between culture and I guess a bit of fun and interest with a quite serious topic. Can that be used as a conversation starter? So that's the plan. Um, and it gives us like a number of other talking points around fast fashion and sustainability and stuff, like trying to create the brand in a truly sustainable way, which I think is going to be another big challenge. Like, how sustainable can we make a fashion brand? Is it even possible to make a sustainable fashion brand? That's going to be an interesting talking point. So that's it, really. I guess that was an extended version, but if I was to summarize it quicker, it would be limited drop t-shirts that are linked directly to number of animals in the wild. And we're gonna, I guess you want to talk a little bit about the idea around the artwork and how we're going to approach that.
Yeah, so I mean, what you just described, it was the initial idea, and then as soon as we got talking about that, these like additional elements kind of fell into place quite nicely. So yeah, on top of that, the idea is that each animal, each t-shirt that we make has a different animal on
Yeah.
it, and
Or
each
plant.
or plant,
Key. Yeah.
um, and each artwork obviously will be unique, but that artwork will be created by an artist who is from the region of which the animal is
Yeah.
located. I was gonna say Bay.
Exactly.
Um, and then and then a percentage of each sale will go to the artist and
Hmm.
also to an organization that is helping in some way to protect either that animal or the area where the animal is located.
Yeah.
Um,
Very
but yeah,
unlikely we'll find a charity for some of these
yeah, really
these species.
specific. But I think
So yeah,
that will be quite a fun thing to get into, I think, trying to find these artists and maybe even doing like a bit of a background on them. And then also trying to find the charities, trying to decide which charity is actually going to be most beneficial. Um, Maybe which charities need the most support, that kind of thing. Maybe even get some of them on, get some artists, get some charity workers on the podcast at some point. Could be quite fun.
yeah.
Um, yeah, that's it. I have to say, my one great elevator pitch, but my one comment is we still haven't said what the name of the brand is.
Yeah, but that's the classic problem. People get so caught up in the name and the brand that they forget to talk about what it is. But yeah, we quite early on came up. We had a few ideas, but we quite early on came up with the brand name, which we're going to go with No Longer Known. Which again, it comes back to this idea that these species are going extinct all the time, and if a lot of them weren't even discovered, and then once they're extinct, this concept that they're no longer known, and we want to try and reverse that. So I quite like it. It follows a nice rhythm of I don't know what the word is for it in branding, but there's something about the rhythm of it. So hopefully you like it. Do give us a comment. Hope because we're going with it. So if unless there's significant pushback, then that's going to be the brand name. So yeah, no longer known is the one we're going with. Right.
Yeah. Can you remember any of the old ones? I can't. Um,
Oh, again, for years we came up with this idea probably about 5 years ago. We've had various different ideas. When you're looking at business ideas and what domain names, what companies already exist. I mean, that's a big problem for like things that are unique, sound unique that aren't already taken. That's difficult.
mm.
A lot of not that a domain name is that important, but a lot of registered trademarks and domains already out there. So it's finding something that's unique and that people can remember that makes sense. I remember looking at kind of like the Japanese word for extinction or something, and just yeah, it's just not, that didn't really work. So I'm
I
happy with
always,
it.
I always struggle with names across all sorts. I remember trying to come up with a name for a band.
Mm,
goal and never being satisfied. So the fact
yeah.
that I'm pretty satisfied with this is quite a big achievement, I
Yeah,
think.
exactly. I think it is. It shouldn't be underestimated. And yeah, we've secured the domain name. It's big, nolongerknown.com, which will be where the landing page and stuff go very shortly. So yeah, happy with it. You've done with so many of these things with the business. You just got to get going. And yeah, if we get Facebook changed its name fairly recently. Well, they're trying to, but people still call it
Mm.
Facebook. And oh, there's various examples of like even really, really established brands like changing their name. So I'm not too worried. I think it's all important to just get going, as with so many of these things. So
I
do you
think
have
that
to kind of really um, round off the idea? Like, do you have any particular species that you've come across after in our discussions that not necessarily will be on the initial t-shirts, but just to give an example to the listeners of a, a type of species that maybe they are unlikely to have heard of, but is facing extinction threats, and
um
it jumped out to you.
well, yeah, we kind of started making a list of animals. I think a kind of side theme to this project is the kind of raising awareness or raising awareness of the importance of all animals rather than just like the poster boys of
Yeah,
conservation.
and therefore biodiversity as a whole. So
Mm.
using species to talk about the wider topic of the whole thing of biodiversity loss is the more species you lose, the more vulnerable we are to various things like diseases and just everything interacts in ways that we don't even understand sometimes, whether it's certain species pollinating certain plants and they've evolved alongside each other for millions of years, right? So I think the feeling in the ecology world is like the more species we lose, that we're going to be having there's impacts we probably don't even realize yet. The more we can keep diversity amongst species, the better chance we've got of surviving. That's
Yeah.
the kind of concept. So I think, as you say, it's to say that yes, let's pandas, elephants, rhinos, great, capture the imagination of people, but if we just saved those four animals, we'd still be screwed. So
Yeah, and I'm not saying that we don't feature cute, beautiful animals on
yeah,
our t-shirts, but I'm also quite keen to have some ugly guys as well.
ugly guys, yeah, yeah, insects,
Um, yeah, it's
weird
like
plants, all those kind of things.
yeah. So I don't know, a couple of examples. I was quite like the mountain chicken. I don't know if you remember that, which is actually a type of frog.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Even
Um,
then, my mind went straight to like some kind of alpine fowl before
yeah,
I remembered it's a frog.
I can't remember where. Oh, it's from Dominica,
Hmm.
one of the Caribbean islands, and apparently only around 130 left in the wild. So super endangered, but some people would say quite boring. Just looks like a normal frog, but that's not the point.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, who else have we got? Quite a lot of these are quite cool, to be fair. Um, birds, quite a lot of these just like quite neutral looking brown birds.
Hmm.
Um, what have we got? The dwarf ibis.
Yeah.
Just quite cool looking beak, but I don't know, nothing too distinguishing about it. From Sao Tome and Principe, is that how you say it?
Yeah, I think so.
100, about 150 of those left in the wild.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited to see. Obviously, this is a whole thing to get into in the future, finding artists and briefing them on what we're looking for, finding the right kind of artist to do something that would work on a t-shirt. But yeah, trying to like, I'm excited to see what they do. For example, with the dwarf ibis, it's like it's quite a normal looking bird, I guess, but what they would draw on from it to create an interesting artwork.
Hmm.
Me personally, I'd focus on the beak being quite an interesting feature, but yeah,
Nice. Yeah, this is one of the big things we've been discussing over the years. Of this idea is like, how would you brief the artist? What elements of the brand would be maintained throughout, and kind of that's a topic for a future episode. Definitely.
yeah.
Um,
Uh, and with the brand in general, we definitely have an episode about that. That's one of the things we've been working on in the background is getting the brand identity together. So we should definitely dive into that in more detail in the future.
yeah, and like so in the next, some of the future episodes, we've got loads of ideas around essentially just building this product in the open. I think with so many, hopefully it'll be useful to you out there if you're thinking about starting a business or you already started one, like seeing the behind the scenes, because so often you see a brand and then it just almost appears overnight. Like obviously there's a lot of hard work that goes behind the scenes. So everything from like how do we market it? How do we source materials? How do we do crowdfunding? Do we how do we validate the idea, and how do we iterate and make sure that it's something that people actually want to buy and stuff. So loads of topics for future episodes, which will hopefully be useful. So I think we'll leave it at that for now, unless there's anything else you wanted to cover off. I think we've talked about the
Hmm.
idea, why we're starting a business, why Matt, what skills Matt brings to the table, and why I went for this idea and him as a co-founder. I think those are the main things. Why we're not going to do nose hats as a business, I just don't. I can't find the passion, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, that's a shame, but this one's okay as well.
Yeah, exactly. So imagine if we just ended it with yeah, nose hats that were with species on. Maybe that's what will happen.
I don't want to rule it out. I feel like, I mean, on a slightly more serious note, I think at the moment it is a t-shirt business, but I think this the overarching concept of like artists designing bespoke artwork about endangered species can be applied to other things. Maybe not nose hats, but it
Yeah.
could become more about the art itself than the t-shirts. It could be about more different types of fashion. Could go down the sock route. Could go.
Yeah, I think the reason the reason I thought t-shirts was a good idea is it's something that it, everyone buys and needs. Like it's something that you wear almost like it can be like a billboard on a person. It's if the aim of the business is to get people talking about this topic, hopefully if the artwork's good enough, it's something that people will see, or it's a conversation starter at the Christmas dinner table or whatever.
Mm,
Rather than having to bring up extinction, it's like, oh, by the way, over the roast potatoes or something. No one likes that. But if it's like some artwork or something interesting, you can find common ground around the art or around something else. Like that, it's all about finding common ground with more people. And
yeah,
yeah, you're right. Like t-shirts feels like a good way to get started and quickly, and something that everyone needs. But you could then look at things like artwork. Yeah, that's another good way. It's on someone's wall again, another talking point, and maybe things we've not even thought of yet.
yeah,
But I think the main premise is like how can we get into different areas of culture with this message of biodiversity loss, right? That's the aim.
yeah, yeah. And maybe this is maybe we get into this a bit more in our next episode of why this a good idea or not.
Yeah. So yeah, episode two, we're going to talk about validating the idea, how we kind of quickly test it, and make sure that we're not completely mad.
We
So
can be
stay
mad
tuned.
and good.
Yeah. There's something to be said for being a bit mad, but yeah, that there's actually demand. Maybe that's the way to
Yeah,
put it.
okay.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Matt. Good to have you on board,
Thank
and
you.
look forward to seeing where this goes in the next episode.
Goodbye.
Bye.